Now, we know we love our influencers, but have you actually seen a health influencer? He does it and does it exceedingly well. Joining me on the show right now, Dr. Chinonso Egemba, Aproko doctor, just in case they're wondering, like, who's she talking about? Aproko doctor, it's so nice to have you here.
Same here.
Look at that. Like, look at you. I hope we're not doing anything unhealthy right now. You know, I hope like the way I'm sitting.
Oh, you're sitting upright. That's fine.
I'm sitting upright. I hope I'm talking well. There's no bacteria that is just. You know, my name is not Nkechi. My name is Kachi, but Nkechi has so far in your hand.
I'm Nkechi and Emeka. They've seen things. They've seen things. But
no, but really, a big shout out to you on what you do on social media, because you would not. I saw this video where people are now responding to you. So you make a video and say, Nkechi, Emeka, stop doing this. And then they actually now make a video and say, you know what, Aproko said we should not do. We are going to do it. How does that make you feel as a content creator, knowing that people are responding to your messages in the numbers that they are responding and with the responses that they're also giving?
I think it makes me feel good. One of the reasons it does that was the entire reason behind my career currently is to help people make informed decisions about their health.
Yeah.
And I had always wanted to do that. So then that was also because even when I was in clinical practice, I used to spend a long time with patients trying to educate them. Some of the people who were privileged to be my patient then would tell you that Nonso teaches a lot, but it was one patient over a 45-minute session and it wasn't efficient. So I needed to reach more people, and I decided to do social media.
So how did we get here? Let's talk about your trajectory. You obviously are a medical doctor.
Yep.
So walk me through how, getting out of school, did you work? How did you end up here right now as Aproko doctor?
Okay, so let's go back.
Let's go back.
Going back now makes me feel old, but yeah. Let's go back. So medical school, we got involved with patients. Usually as a medical student, you're told to take history from a patient. And so I get to see this man who has a stroke.
Okay.
Right? Transient stroke. And then I take history from him and his son, get him to see the doctor, and that was it. Came back 2 years later to prepare for my final exams. And here was this same man, but this time it was fatal. And so it got me thinking, was it that this man did not understand what healthcare was about? I mean, the doctor spent time telling him how dangerous the second stroke would be and the things he needed to do in order to prevent the next stroke from coming. But how did he end up having a second stroke? And I realized that one of the things that was affecting us was something I call the curse of knowledge. So just because something is very obvious to you, you assume it's obvious to other people. And it got worse, the gap in knowledge got worse when I now started working as a medical doctor somewhere in Imo State, right? So started working as a doctor, and I really got to see how bad the practices were. I mean, this were mothers who had children who had convulsions, probably due to fever or some other cause, and they would put their child's feet in the fire. Some of them would put their urine in the baby's eyes. Some of them would get cow dung, mix it with something, some herbs, and try to force it down the baby's throat, all in an effort to stop the convulsion from happening. And I realized that it was not just one woman, it was not just one mother, it was something that permeated the whole community. And that was when I said, you know what, now let me try and get into radio and try and change this narrative by playing it loud on the radio. Try to get into radio once. They said, we don't think you're good enough. I went to another radio station. You know how I
do. I get that.
So, but then again, I still had that burden, and I really wanted to help a lot of people. And I realized, okay, I have a Facebook account somewhere, and I was good with graphic designing. So let me start sharing small health snips in graphic designs and put them out there. And it really felt like nobody was paying attention. And I said, okay, friends and family have seen me to finish. Let's go to Instagram. Instagram was worse. And I went to Twitter, now X. And it was the same thing for a while. And one day something happened. And I decided to tell a story about it. And it went viral. And so it got me thinking, people love stories. So might as well use storytelling to pass across this message that people have been ignoring all this while. And here we are. 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a 9-year journey.
Yeah, it's a 9-year journey.
At what point would you say it peaked within this 9-year period?
COVID, 2020.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that was just 4 years ago.
And that was just 4 years ago. So it means that for 5 years, I was under the radar.
And you were just consistent, doing your thing.
Yep.
And then COVID happened, and obviously everyone needed to hear.
Yep. Everybody now, it was like health was in their face right now. You know, you had to make a decision. And people started going back to my old content. And were like, oh, he actually has stuff that he's been doing all this while. How wasn't I paying attention? You know,
that's usually the story. Like, no, but I find it really interesting. You put it in a very interesting way, behavioral change communication. Yeah. So how does that work now? And based on the fact that this is something that you now do, because some people would say, is he really a doctor? You are really a doctor, aren't you?
I get that question a lot. Is he really a doctor? Are you really a... Sometimes some people meet me, walk up to me and say, I just want to ask you one question. Are you really a doctor? And I'm like, yes, I am. But just because, you know, I don't have a stethoscope on my neck, you can't necessarily trace what hospital I'm working in. You just assume, oh, he's not a real doctor like that. Without realizing that there are different phases of medicine, right? There are doctors who work in a clinic, call that clinical practice, and there are doctors who work outside the clinic. When you have a pandemic, for instance, most of the work is done outside, not inside. There are doctors who are responsible for that. Yeah. When you talk about healthcare policies, there are doctors who are also responsible for that. When you talk about money being spent in healthcare, there are doctors who are also responsible for that. So not every doctor must sit in a hospital treating patients. However, mine is very deliberate. There's a reason I don't wear a stethoscope. There's a reason I dress very casual. Because I don't want to have that barrier between the populace and myself. I want it to be, I'm talking to my guy who is a doctor. I'm talking to my friend who is a doctor. Not I'm talking to a doctor who is my friend. You know,
No, I really like that. I think most importantly, your messages definitely get across. Even in the fact that you talk about more like the root causes of lots of the bigger issues, which takes me now to the fact that you're now taking this behavioral change communication into film, into television with Stitch. That's a little series you have on different short stories. Walk me through that entire process.
So for me to do that, I'll have to go back so that people can really understand. So let me go back again. I hated math growing up. Simply because I just couldn't make sense of the numbers. It didn't make any sense. I would look at numbers and immediately get confused. But then when you tell me things like Emeka has 2 oranges and Nkechi has 4 oranges, how many oranges do they have in total? And I'll say, okay, 6. That made more sense, simply because it was put in the story. And that's how a lot of us have learned. We learn and information sticks through stories. The current, or rather the previous way in which health education has been done is to fill in knowledge gaps. And so we'll say, here are the 5 causes of cholera, for instance, or here are the 5 causes of hepatitis, for instance. Anybody who is not directly interested in hepatitis at that point in time tends to switch off and is not watching that.
Sure.
You have to have known somebody close to you. You have to have, probably been threatened by it one time for you to pay interest in that. However, stories catch our attention no matter what you're being told about. And stories have been a great way to actually pass across information while at the same time inspiring them. Because if I'm teaching, all I'm doing is I'm just informing you. When I tell you a story, I'm inspiring you. I want you to take action. So the greatest activists in our times have always been storytellers. Martin Luther King, for instance, Nelson Mandela, they told stories. And people believed those stories and ran with it, right? And so I realized that was a gap in healthcare. We don't tell stories.
That's so serious.
We teach. And we assume that everybody is in the classroom. Meanwhile, they are not. And so I said, okay, let's take this broader. How can we tell more stories? And we looked at different, the first episode of Stitches, it's on YouTube. So whoever wants to watch it can go to YouTube and search up Stitches Aproko Doctor. You see the first episode, it's about cervical cancer. It was more of a testing for us because we've been shouting HPV, which is the virus responsible for cervical cancer, is sexually transmittable. And we thought people understood. But then we put it in a story, and what was the story about? A faithful wife who married a philandering husband and then ended up dying from cervical cancer even though she was faithful to the man.
I see.
And then people go, Oh, so it's actually sexually transmittable. And I say, yes, that's what we've been saying all this while. And that video just made it clear. But it's the same thing we've been saying. We just put it in a story. And the next month, we said, okay, we're hosting a free cervical cancer screening for you guys.
How was the reception to that?
We had more people than we could handle.
Wow. Yeah.
So the video went out that day. We had over 6,000 women register. We had thousands of people show up at Maryland Mall. We could only screen 370 something. And when we're done with that, about 22 of those women had changes in their cervix that could have been cancer. And they were treated for free. And all of this was done through crowdfunding. So you can see that we're using stories to inspire people to take action and then changing the course of their lives whatsoever.
Now, this is what you are doing as Aproko Doctor.
Yes.
But Aproko Doctor is one person. And just as we have industries across Nigeria, every single industry has key stakeholders in that industry. And one of the most important, I would think, is health. Just earlier, we're talking about the declaration, for instance, the Abuja Declaration, where we spoke about how 15% was to go to healthcare. 15% of the budget every single year for countries. AU gathered and said, this is what we're going to do. But implementation has been a major issue. Healthcare in Nigeria is a huge, huge, huge problem. As Aproko Doctor, clearly this is something that bothers you. What are some of the things you see and you notice and you just ask yourself, am I the only person thinking? Why are we, because again, it could be lack of available funding. It could be lack of sensitization. It could be lack of literally knowing how to solve these problems. But here you are telling stories, and through crowdfunding, you were able to put together this thing. And a woman out there has possibly the chances of her averted cancer. And cancer is not a joke. My mom treats that, so it's not something you joke with. So what is it that we're missing out on with our industry?
Priority, first of all. First of all, I don't want to sound like I'm an authority in this field, but there are certain things that are glaring, right? When we talk about healthcare in any country in the world, one of the most important pillars of that country's healthcare is the primary healthcare system. Now, because the primary healthcare system doesn't look very flashy, I mean, it's just a small hospital that treats very minor cases, right? It's the bedrock. That's where you go when you have malaria. That's when you go when you have uncomplicated UTI. That's where you're probably supposed to go for your antenatal classes. That's where you go for small issues.
But the primary healthcare is not.
But the primary healthcare system has been neglected for a long while. And so we have politicians come into power, and one of the first things that is done when they want to, I want to be remembered for doing something about the healthcare, is to build a quote and unquote ultra-modern health center. And it's probably a 5 or 6 story building that at some point probably never serves anybody. But the primary healthcare centers in the numerous locations in that particular state are probably neglected. Not everybody can come to that ultra-modern health center. So the money that was supposed to use for that ultra-modern health center that was probably functional before that particular point, that was even supposed to go to the primary healthcare centers, went into the building of this ultra-modern health center. They become neglected. We have primary healthcare centers where the fridges supposed to use to store vaccines are probably used to store Zobo or something. These happen. Why? Simply because the primary healthcare center is neglected. And if we're talking about universal healthcare, because each and every one of us has a right to healthcare without going broke. It's a fundamental human right. But a lot of people in Nigeria pay out of pockets simply because one of the pillars of the healthcare has been neglected. So the things that I would normally have paid for, because even when you're talking about health information, this should be happening at the primary healthcare center, not necessarily a Aproko Doctor, if we're being honest. Because in the primary healthcare center that speaks to the people in their own different languages, in the way that they can all relate to.
Because it's community-based.
Exactly, it's community-based.
Community-based.
And so we're having to, have a lot of doctors now come up and speak Pidgin. This one is speaking a different language. I don't use vernacular in my speech simply because we're trying to fill in those gaps. Because healthcare actually starts from information. So one of the things I noticed that the primary healthcare system is negated, or rather is what you call this when you is neglected.
It's neglected. Yes. Now, Speaking to that problem, you have to link it to the exodus of medical practitioners in Nigeria. Because when you think about the fact that there's barely enough doctors in the teaching hospitals, in the secondary healthcare facilities, then
the tertiary ones too.
Exactly. Who's now going to be in the primary healthcare? Like, who's going to stay there? If you think about it. So that's another issue. Which takes me to wonder if you've ever considered leaving Nigeria before.
Oh, I considered leaving Nigeria many years ago. I mean, I was very close. I was preparing for my exams. But for some reason, the burden of the average Nigerian who had no knowledge of healthcare just kept me behind. I just hope I don't regret. I just hope I don't regret this decision.
No, but I mean, technically, you've told a different path.
Yeah.
Say, for instance, you were solely practicing.
I probably would have left the country.
Yeah, I think
I probably would have left the country, and that is because the conditions in which doctors are meant to practice shouldn't be so.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked in one of the tertiary healthcare centers in Nigeria, and for many months I wasn't paid. How did you expect me to survive? I had to go look for a job in other hospitals while still keeping the main job. So it means that and that is the condition of many doctors here in Nigeria. The single hospital you're working in is probably not enough to pay your bills.
Yeah.
And so you're having to work in do different jobs. What this does is that it negates your attention from the primary job in which you're supposed to do. You're probably tired.
Yeah, there's that as well.
And that affects the quality of care you give your patients, which leads to medical error and probably leads to complications down the road.
Exactly. Loads of cases on negligence.
Exactly.
That's what it's called, at least.
We have doctors who have to perform magic. I have a classmate who made an incubator out of a cardboard box in order to keep a baby alive. It should never happen.
But that's technology right there, but that should never happen still.
There's already a device for that. It's called an incubator.
I know, but that's like some really good inspiration. But I get exactly what you mean. Aproko Doctor, how can we do better? What can we do better? Because I keep emphasizing, this is one person deciding to do what it is you're doing, and not everybody is a doctor. But generally speaking, how can we do better? What can we do better? How can every single Nigerian contribute? Because I'd always say this, the creative industry, which is why I'm so happy that this is an industry that I am in, is one where you would find a lot of people doing things for themselves. They decided, you know what, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make the music industry work. I'm going to make our movie industry work. And now you're saying, I'm going to make our health industry work through creativity as well. So how can we all key into this? How can we do better?
I think the ball goes both ways. The first, the people. The second, policymakers.
Yeah.
Healthcare has to be a priority. And for healthcare to be a priority, the people need to know who to demand healthcare from. Now we have local governments who are now autonomous. They probably have some budget right now that has been allocated towards healthcare. Who's going to demand and say, we want to know how much is allocated to the healthcare of this local governments and how it was implemented? Because when people don't demand it, what happens? It probably finds its way into other, pockets and other projects that are probably white elephants somewhere. Demand. But before people demand, they have to be aware. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. So this is just one piece in the puzzle, which, now people are aware, and we hope they demand. Someone else's job could probably be to now rally up the people and get them to demand and hold the lawmakers accountable. We also have to make sure that the lawmakers have laws that keep, because the way the country is right now is simply because of the laws. And some of the laws have to be revisited. What are the laws we have about healthcare? What are the policies around maternal mortality? What are the laws about mental health? What are the policies? I mean, up till now, suicide is still being treated as a crime.
As a crime, yeah.
It means that the conversation about mental health has not even started in the lawmaking arm of the government.
Yeah.
So if that hasn't happened, it means that we're still miles away from actually. So let us start from the base and build our way up. Or let's just attack it at different, points. And this is me just calling on anybody who has any form of influence. Because whether we like it or not, you're going to be affected by this country's
Somehow,
healthcare one
yeah.
way or the other.
Yeah.
Somebody says, oh, the best place to enjoy your money is in Nigeria. And I'm like, let's just assume you get knocked down by a bus somewhere. I have a doctor friend who was involved in an accident somewhere on Lekki Ekpe Expressway.
Yeah.
And he was knocked unconscious,
Yeah.
had a brain concussion, got himself up by some feet, and drove himself to the nearest hospital, or else he would have died.
Okay.
How I was able to do that, I have no idea. Every time he tells me that story, it blows my mind. Because of that experience, he started up a emergency response app that was supposed to solve that issue. But did he really have to go through that?
To know that he needed
What's
that.
the emergency system in this country? We might use states like Lagos as landmarks. How about other states
Yeah.
where people don't even have an emergency number to reach to? Meanwhile, there's probably budget for that, but nobody's demanding it. So if you have any form of influence whatsoever, entertainment entertainment was not just supposed to be for the sake of entertainment alone. Let us go back to the time when we used to use our stories to inspire people.
Which is exactly what you're doing now with Stitch.
Yes, but one person can't do it alone.
What's your next episode called?
The next episode is about STDs and contact tracing, which is the responsibility of anybody who has been diagnosed with a sexually transmitted disease to go tell their sexual partner or partners that I think you should go get yourself checked out. But here we just, she's going to deal with herself. He's going to find it out.
We'll find out eventually.
Find out eventually.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah,
quite
sure.
honestly.
Yeah,
Aproko
sure.
Doctor, this has been absolutely amazing. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And we'll keep following and watching for more tips on how to stay healthy.
Thank
right?
you. Yep.